Well, that's the recording. Would you like to get started, Mr. Chair?
Yes, call the meeting to order. And we don't have a Pledge of Allegiance on there, but we can do that anyway. On the agenda, but we can do that anyway.
Sure.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Delegate Gallagher,
Here.
Vice Chair Green,
Here.
Delegate Killian,
Here.
Delegate Harder,
Here.
Delegate King has not joined us yet. And as I said previously, Delegate McKelvey and Deputy Speaker Friesel, the alternates, will not be joining us today. And so you do have 4, which is quorum for the committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. So it looks like we have a representative from Eversource with us today. Ms. Goldstein, can you hear me?
I can. You can call me Ronit. And
Okay,
I'm glad you
Ronit.
said miss. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Not a huge fan of ma'am.
Nor am I,
Personally.
nor is my wife.
Hey, Lillian, how are you? I see some familiar faces.
So I think Clerk Fletcher had kind of laid out to you what we're trying to do. We have a proposal before the county and to try and encourage resiliency, storm resiliency. So what I was hoping you could help us out with is to discuss a little bit about the grid reliance and perhaps some areas in Barnstable County which are more prone to outages than others. So if you could help us out with that, that will be useful to us as we go through this possibility.
Sure, I'm happy to fill in some color, if you will, and to provide some information. So, unfortunately, you can't predict the weather and you can't predict where the winds are going to blow. And I could say that the Outer Cape is more prone than the Mid Cape or the Upper Cape, but then we have 4 tornadoes touch base that has never been heard of on the Cape in 2019. So if you're asking me personally, just from having worked at Eversource for 8 years and on the Cape for Eversource for a big chunk of that time, I don't know that you want to limit yourself to a particular region within the county. That's just my personal opinion because I've seen it run the gamut in terms of issues. In terms of reliability, that's our charge as a utility. That is what that's the only thing we're really supposed to do is deliver safe, reliable power at the most affordable price to the extent possible, right? Some would argue whether that's true or not, but that's what the DPU holds us accountable as well as other state agencies. So we have reliability work throughout the Cape, all over, right? Whether it's regular maintenance to replace equipment, anywhere from that to new substations proposed, and as well as reconductoring and rebuilding lines and doing some underground work where it makes sense in vulnerable areas. So it really runs the gamut. I think in terms of your proposal, that's why I wouldn't limit yourself because we've got work throughout, and every year we're and the plan changes sometimes because if I take a step back, we're rated on the reliability of every single circuit across the entire service territory. So every single circuit has a number, and we can go back 10 years, for example, Mr. Killian, or I'm sorry, I'm not calling you correctly, or I don't know how to address you guys. I'm sorry, forgive me. Delegates.
That's fine.
It gets scored. We have basically a report card that we report on every single circuit, every single year. And sometimes that is a number of ratings, it's months between interruption, it's number of customers out, and it's how long they were out. And a circuit, for example, on your street, your street could have a circuit that in the next, year and a half just exhibits behavior based, outages more frequently, that it becomes a poor performing circuit. And we say, you know what, we need to fix, we need to propose whatever upgrade, whether it's changing the configuration, changing the type of wire at the top that's more, maybe there's, it's a heavily treed area, right? Even though we're cutting back, we need wire that's more resilient. So it'll go to the top of the list. So I couldn't tell you today what we'd have, for a plan in 2 years, right? That can change. And that's also based on a number of other factors, including load, right? Not just reliability, but not just resiliency for storms, but meeting demand, electrification, et cetera. That makes
I
sense?
understand that. Yeah, I do. I understand that the complexities of it all. I think what I was hoping to get out of it is say, you do have some numbers where areas maybe where it's just closer to the coast, and I understand the variability of weather that plays a part, but it's a large geographic area, and so what we're trying to get to is perhaps looking at areas that are more likely to experience outages than others, and I understand how difficult that may be, but I also
So
understand you do
yeah.
review circuits periodically, and you try to upgrade and make your assessments that way.
I can get some data. It's all publicly available too. I can ask our system planners and our distribution engineers to provide me with some data. It's like a massive spreadsheet. That's the issue. I mean, I could say anecdotally, what are the areas that if one were to target, right? Forgive me, is the goal to target, to limit this fund for just those, like, what is your what are you driving towards? So help me to understand why you're asking this question. I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, it would be limited, obviously, and the program, if it comes to be, would try to concentrate on areas that have the greatest impact. One of the arguments that has been made is if more people had some sort of backup generator or some type of resilience, there'd be less need to have shelters, which would be a cost avoidance. So we're trying to balance that with the other. And so if we could get at areas that, experience more frequent outages. I happen to live in an area where the Cape, we have very few outages. So I don't have the issue, but I think people experience it in greater detail. Maybe they're at the end of a circuit run, so there's more likelihood that they're going to have an interruption than I would say. So I understand what I'm asking for is not like an easy answer, but just something that might steer us in the right direction and to see if it's even possible. Maybe it's not possible to get that side of information to encourage people in those areas to try and look for alternatives.
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think it will be a challenge only because, if you take the blizzard, everyone was out. So I don't think that storm was forgiving of any community on the Cape. I think every single Cape was all in the 90% out, 90 something. So it really, really depends on so many factors. I'm trying to figure out how I can help you in getting some data that would be helpful to you. There's a lot of end of the line. There's a lot of private systems too. We run into that on the Cape and on the Vineyard. Sometimes owners don't even know that it's private. They don't even know that they own, and that's a whole other issue that we have to figure out as a company. How do we solve that? It's not, again, it's private because it's private developers, but that came up a lot. And those were people at the end of the line in a heavily treated area in, say, Truro, right? Or at the end of the line in Wellfleet. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to steer you. And you're not looking on a hyper local neighborhood level. You're looking more on a town level. Is that what you're looking for?
Exactly.
Okay.
More,
Right.
maybe geographic areas. I was fortunately in that storm last winter. I was probably one of the few that didn't lose power at any point. But I know a lot of people did. And that was kind of an unusual event. I think we can all agree that's probably a 10-year event to something to that effect. So obviously we're looking to, not just those events, but the ones that are in between as well. And I'm asking you these questions because this is the only way we can get answers, and maybe if you don't have them, but I did want to have you in to discuss that. And I guess along those lines, does EverSource have any programs to help to assist any of their customers, whether they're disabled or in need of electricity, or they can't go without electricity? Do they have any programs that help people to provide backup systems?
I'm not aware. No, I'm not aware
Okay.
of a program that helps to pay for, say, a generator. We do have a program that if someone is relies on electricity for life-sustaining purposes, like oxygen, home dialysis, they have to get a doctor's note. They have to get it, it's certified, so it's not everybody
Mhm.
can have that. It doesn't guarantee priority. However, it's more of an awareness program. We will send out an outbound message to those life support customers, we call them, or critical customers, letting them know, then they know that we know that they're there, right? That they're on our list, that to prepare to seek alternate shelter if available, or if they have family and things of that nature. And we do outbound calls to check in on them. If we don't get a hold of them, we have the next call is made to our single point of contact at each town, which is typically police or fire chief. And we say, we've called this address because of HIPAA, we can't give names, but we say no one answered. Could be that they're in another state, but you might want to do a wellness check. So there is a process in place. It doesn't prioritize them, only because, they could be at the way end of the line
Sure.
and there's no way we're going to be able to energize them.
Mhm.
But there is a program in place for that. And then other, measures through, we have liaisons in this last example, this last event, the big blizzard, we embedded a liaison who normally would be in our area work center in Yarmouth. We embedded in all 15 towns, someone in their emergency operations center. So there could be coordination if there were people that were vulnerable, if there were priority circuits that needed to be up because there's a nursing home that if they don't have a solution. So first of all, nursing homes are supposed to have, I think by law, backup generation, but say that we've had these situations, generation went, they've got 100 residents that they're going to have to physically move with ambulances. We've been in those situations where we've tried to prioritize those, similar to shelters that are required to have backup generation.
Yep.
We've done those prioritization, and we've also rolled generation to some of these critical. This is more critical and vulnerable populations. We've done that before. So there are processes in place. I know that doesn't satisfy the question you asked, but there's not funds, but there's other resources and processes in place to help mitigate that and potentially energize those folks more quickly than others because of their vulnerable status, right? And same with critical facilities in towns,
If you had to
hospitals, same thing.
speculate, the number of households that would include Cape Wide that you have that relationship with?
I know I can find out exactly the number, and I think you'd be surprised how few.
Okay.
I think because they have to go through that process. Not everybody gets to be part of that. They don't tick all the requirements. So, there's a pretty small number.
Okay.
But relative to what I think people think it's a very large, there's a different program that ensures people have securities in place not to be shut off. So that's a different story. But this is specific to outages and storm events.
If you could send us that as well as the criteria for these programs, I think that will be helpful to us as well.
Yeah, I could send you, you're looking for the total number. That's what you're looking for?
Yeah, the total number and what
curiosity.
in the process involved in it, because
Sure.
that discussion did come up about, either prioritizing or targeting this particular program at folks who are, or cannot go without power for any extended period of time.
Yeah, I will say it's not the same list that I don't know if you've consulted like with your Council on Aging folks across the Cape. They typically keep a list of what they'll consider vulnerable critical customers, but the lists aren't the same because they're not folks that they're just more vulnerable population, but they don't necessarily they don't qualify for the might not qualify, I should say, not don't, but they might not qualify for our program.
Okay, I've been kind of monopolizing the discussion here, and I'd like to open this up to other committee members if they have some questions. Delegate Green.
Thank you, Chair Kellyanne, and thank you, Ms. Goldstein, for being here. Um, I happen to be from the town that the entire town was shut down of power during the last storm. Wellfleet was it was the last town to be, in fact, turned on. So there was, even though there were areas where the power lines were fixed, we still couldn't get the power. And I personally was out for 5 days. I know people that were out longer than that. I do not have a generator. My house got to 42 degrees. And that's just one example of the stories I heard from the people in my town. I mean, this is really, from my standpoint, it's unacceptable. I mean, is there a plan as far as you're talking about reliability and resilience to address that in any way where that shouldn't happen again? I know the storm was unusual, but if we're talking about storms becoming more intense in the future, is Eversource making any plans to deal with that in a more sustainable way, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I will preface this by saying that was an unprecedented storm. I heard from public safety officials and town leadership across the entire region, and the South Shore and South Coast was completely out as well, including the town I live in. I would say a big portion of the town. I heard across the board that it was the worst storm that they had seen in decades. I got some video footage sent to me from Truro that showed, indicated such 75 to 80 plus mile per hour winds at the height of the storm. So so much tree damage, including trees that we don't own and have no ability to trim. That's a big issue. Again, we're repairing and upgrading everywhere that it's needed, undergrounding where it makes sense. Undergrounding, has come up a lot. It's not feasible all around because it simply the model in which we must exist, we're a regulated utility. The cost of all that is borne by the ratepayer, and then and I hate the word ratepayer, to be quite frank, the customer, the resident, I much prefer, but it is a terminology I'm not super fond of, but it is what it is. All of the services, so just to understand why it's not feasible to do everything, it's money that would be spent ultimately borne by the end user, including all the services that have to go underground, and then all the other utilities that share the pole with us. If you want the poles to go away, they all have to go underground, and then all the transformers that are on the poles have to find real estate. We have to get rights to put that in a green box, right? A pad mounted transformer that you see sometimes in underground. So it is a huge effort. I'm not saying it can't happen. It just would, that's why we underground where it makes sense, and where it's feasible. And then restoration underground has a whole other set of steps that have to be taken. So the short answer, which was long-winded, and forgive me for that, Ms. Green, there is a plan. I mean, I will say, having been here for 8 years, I'm actually stunned that we got as far as we got by Friday of that week, because Monday was impossible to work. The wind conditions was simply unsafe. Tuesday, the roads, part of Wednesday, were a disaster. I felt so terrible for the towns. In fact, I think we were helping each other with plowing, to be honest with you. So we really got rolling on Wednesday, and we were substantially complete, which means under 1% of the customers across the whole territory by Friday night. I think that's pretty incredible, with tons of resources overnight, which typically you don't see because it's really hard to work at night, because there's no light, the temperature, the conditions. So I hope that answered your question. It's
Not
top
really.
of mind, but I think
Yeah.
this is, It's top of mind, but it's, it's an unprecedented storm, just like a hurricane or a tornado that comes through. You have to, you can build and it could be a brand new infrastructure, and Mother Nature is so not forgiving.
Well, I would like to follow up. So I appreciate your answer. Is there a plan about you focused on mostly the underground, plan moving forward. Is there a plan that we could look at and understand how Eversource is going to roll this out and what areas will be covered? Because
Delegate Green, I just want to keep this discussion relative to the program we're talking about and not, the grid overall. We could perhaps have Ms. Goldstein back at a later date to discuss that. But at this conversation, I would like to keep it to that topic. And we do have two more members of the committee that would like to ask questions. We have a couple more guests to get through. So I'm gonna hold you there and move on to Delegate Harder.
Okay, can I come back again specific to that question?
Perhaps, yes. Okay.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Chair Killian. So I know it was a big storm, but we lose power without it being a big storm. The power in our town on the Cape really is very fickle. It can go off on a beautiful sunny day. So what we're trying to avoid is people, like you said, that the people you don't really have a program for, but that you keep track of to call. We don't want those people to die because they don't get power. So these are maybe the people we're thinking we would like to get generators to. What would be helpful to know is, are there any plans? What are the plans to upgrade the Cape? I'm not talking underground. That's never going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. But I mean, we still have double poles, in our town. So if we could get some sort of roadmap of, at least it looks like potentially people in this town aren't going to lose their power on a sunny day. If we could have some sort of plan like that, letting us know where upgrades are going to go, then that might help us, because if nothing's going to be done, then we know how wide our area should be. But if we know certain towns are really going to be getting a look at, let's say, the summer, then we know, okay, maybe we don't have to focus on them. So is there some sort of way for us to at least plan on where you think there might be upgrades coming at some point?
So I can talk to engineering. It's a moving target. There are plans every year. That is our job, is to that's why our engineering department is the busiest, I think. Well, everybody's busy, but that in operations, we're fixing. There's a maintenance group out of our Yarmouth Area Work Center. You see them out in the bucket trucks all day long. So double poles, I just wanted, for the record, have nothing to do with reliability. Much of the time it's a double pole because either someone hit the pole because their driving skills were impaired, we'll just say. They hit a pole, we had to install a new one, and we transferred our equipment right away. There might have been an outage caused by that car, okay, that car accident. And it takes time for everybody, all the other utilities, to get on the new pole. The other reason for double poles is actually upgrades. So when we do improvements, much of the time we take advantage of that capital project. And sometimes it demands a taller pole because of the infrastructure that needs to be on the pole. And that's why you see double poles. So there's no direct corollary. Those are not the areas where you have reliability. I will say another piece to take into consideration: outages on a summer day might not have to do with wind. They could have to do with animals, birds. Osprey have taken out the entire Outer Cape on a sunny July afternoon. I've been there, because they they nest on a switch. It can be a squirrel, could be a rodent, it could be all kinds of animals that get into equipment, unfortunately. So those are some of the things, and there's ways to mitigate that. We've worked with the wildlife organizations across the Cape to help deter these birds from, they don't want them on the equipment either because they could get hurt, right? So there is a plan, but like I said, if you're targeting certain town and it's throughout the entire Cape, I don't have that plan with me. I can talk to our engineers to say, you know, this year, where are we doing upgrades? Suffice to say, they're going to say in every single town on the Cape, we have upgrades. That's not going to help you with your decision. I wouldn't limit you. I wouldn't limit to certain towns. That would be my opinion, because again, there's so many factors, and then next year is going to be different. So are you going to revisit this I don't know. You know what I mean? That just, to me, you're limiting yourself versus looking on case by case. And we can provide data in terms of reliability. You know, probably if your area has seen a lot of short duration out, and again, you don't want to, just so you understand, a generator is not worth a short duration. The cost for a short duration outage, it's different, a 5-day outage, but for something that's restored within an hour, you know, right? Or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We have a lot of automated switching. That's the type of upgrading we're doing too, is automated switching so that you can reroute power. You know, if your house is out, you can be rerouted from a different area. You know, if there's appropriate switches on your circuit. I hope that answered your question. I know I'm speaking really broadly, but I don't have any of the specifics with me today.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair Killian. Thank you, Ms. Goldstein, for being here. This is very informative. I too lived through the storm. I was out without power for 4 or 5 days, and I volunteered at the Eastham Library, which is a warming station. And I got to witness a lot of the vulnerable population of Eastham, the people who really needed help. And I want to focus on part of your statement that dealt with that. You said that Council on Agings have lists of people they consider vulnerable that might be a lot longer than the lists that Eversource keeps. And you said that a lot of people wouldn't qualify. And I'm curious what criteria Eversource applies to put people in that category. And I'm not sure exactly what extra level of service that might qualify them for, but let's talk about that a little bit. Who do you see as the vulnerable population who you might be able to help more, and why is your list shorter than the Council on Aging's?
Sure. So the list I was referring to is the life support customers. So those are people that without power, they rely on power for life sustaining, not to keep warm.
Right.
They cannot live without their oxygen. I'll give you an example. Just a real life example. One of our liaisons called a life support customer several years ago during a storm. Wasn't a customer on the Cape, but it was a customer somewhere else. They said, I'm good. I'm hunkering down. I've got a blanket. You know, they had a conversation with them, and through the conversation learned that they had only 3 hours of oxygen available. And they knew that this outage was part of a very big, complex restoration. And so they were able to say, you know what, sir, I'm a little bit concerned. I'm going to bring this back to your, you know, my single point of contact, your fire chief or your police chief. And we're going to see if we, you know, if they can evacuate that person. So the reason that the list is shorter is because the qualifications are for life sustaining. That they cannot, that simply by virtue of not having electricity, you know, that's a different story than, and forgive me, I nobody wants to be cold, right? But it's a different categorization. So that's why I know it to be true that it is. And it may be because people are unaware of the program. That might be something we could do better. It may be because they don't qualify for it. But those are the ones that fall into that category. Did that answer your question?
Yes, Delegate Gallagher, you want to follow? You're muted.
And yes,
Okay.
I had switched to a different screen to look at my notes. I'm sorry. Yes, that did largely answer my question, and that you apply a criterion of life sustaining. And of course, the Council on Aging is considering vulnerable in a different way. I understand. It's also interesting that the power line on my street is actually underground. And for 50 years, we thought Eversource owned it, and we only learned within the last 5 years that Eversource doesn't own it. And that has led to a whole situation where we're dealing with the State House to help us deal with you. And I'm glad to have your contact. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, and what town is this in? Eastham?
I'm in Tam.
So one thing I will tell you that your town leadership did, which was very, very smart. Several years ago, they helped to pass, you as a resident probably helped, they passed special legislation because these private lines are a problem, but we can't take them over. Our tariff, right? Our rules and regulations require that they be brought up to today's standards, and then we can take them over, which means costs being paid for by the customer, because we didn't install, we have no idea how they were installed, and many of them are direct buried. They were installed by developers.
Yeah, we're
So-
happy with Volkswagen, and you want a Lamborghini. I get it.
No. We want not at all. We're going by the rules and regulations that we're bound by. We have no idea. It's like you buying a house from you. It's actually that's not a good comparison. So the town of Eastham passed special legislation that the town could support its residents and issue betterments. The utility cannot do that, but now the town of Eastham can. So it's something that is, a thought, and they consulted with us. They said, what do you think of this idea? And our government affairs, our regulatory folks said, we think this is a great idea because you have the ability to borrow and then to help the residents and then issue betterments for
Yeah, I
upgrading of
understand.
infrastructure. So,
And
so
you're
anyway.
right. I'm personally involved in that case, and this hearing is not about that, but we can talk about it at another
Just
time.
saying, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
Delegate Green, very quickly, because we do have two other guests we need to move on to.
Oh, okay. Right. So I did want to make it very clear that I am very interested in the data that you can provide to us town by town about reliability. That would be very helpful and useful for all of us. And I really wanted to ask a couple of other questions, but I will ask one. So years ago, there was a grant given by the utility to the county for $520,000 for educational purposes. Is there anything like that Eversource does? Perhaps they could, because obviously, given these storms and our outages, it's not so reliable. Maybe we could work with the county to do educational.
I don't believe that grant came from Eversource. I believe that came from Con Ed. So that's totally different funding source.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
are there any such grants or anything that you could provide, or that your company does provide anywhere?
So as in terms of education, the utility can be a resource to you. In fact, there's conversations that are being had about resilient education on resiliency that are early stages. I'm working with folks that are associated with the Chamber and Climate Change Collaborative, as well as the Tech Council. There's some talks on how we can potentially hold quarterly. We haven't talked about, we just sort of, it's in diapers. We're just talking through how we can do some educational forums. So we are a resource to the community in terms of educating. In terms of grants, we do have a community impact grant program that awards grants to 501c3 organizations. So if the county has a 501c3, I think we gave to the emergency management a couple of years in a row to Barnstable County. If there's a worthy 501c3 that the assembly would like us to consider, I am happy to approve a grant. These are not huge grants. They're anywhere from 500 to 2,500. Sometimes I can beg for a little bit more, but that can be a lot of money for a small organization. So if you know of one that would be a good path to serve for this, to serve your needs and what we're talking about today, then I'm happy to have a conversation about that and to approve the grant. My group approves them, the small grants.
Thank you.
So, yeah, sure.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Goldstein. This was very informative. We really appreciate your attendance and taking your time to meet with us. And hopefully, if you can, if the other delegates have other further questions, they can follow up with Clerk Fletcher. But if you could send along the information we discussed, that'd be greatly appreciated.
So I just want to make sure, Chair Killian, that I heard what you need and that I can deliver the right. We'd like the total count of life support customers in Barnstable County. And then it's not going to be reliability scores, if you want to call them. I call it a report card. They're not going to be by town because it's a grid. So the
That's
same
fine.
circuit could go multiple towns. So I'll try to figure out a good way to give you some reliability data. How about that?
That'd be great. And then also the criteria involved in the life support customer qualification, or how you get people involved in that program.
Sure
Just so we
thing.
can understand that.
And I would send that to Owen.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. I wish everyone a great afternoon. I'm happy to join anytime you would like me to, or to bring a subject matter expert from the company that is knows more about other aspects of the business. Happy to have them join anytime. Just let me know.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
We have Director Capola on with us, and if she could speak with us a little bit about the analysis that she did. I would first like to say it was very detailed. For the members here, I'm not sure you know the genesis of it, but I had reached out with some questions to Director Capola regarding the financial viability of a program, that if should we follow up with it, and gave her a couple of scenarios to go through, primarily to see what this particular program might cost us to administer, how long it might take to make it self-sustaining. So with that, if Director Capola could just kind of give us a really high-level overview of this, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Delegate Killian. I prepared some information based on some prompts that I received that Delegate Killian had proposed with regard to information on borrowing rates for homeowners, information with the year terms, 5 years, 10 years, mixed terms of the loans, and then whether the program would be self-sufficient. I delved a little further into administrative costs and replicated the Aquafunds costs. So we felt like we had data that we could use that was reliable. And so, I broke those costs down to what does it cost Aquafund to issue a loan, gather all the documents, verify the documents, so on and so forth. And then
I'm not
what
sure.
does it cost to collect on those loan payments? And so it came down to a pretty standard cost of loan issuance, and again, of payment processing for the loans. And so what did this research determine? And I guess I should have backed up to assume that all of you have this document, correct?
Yes, it was circulated to the committee.
Okay, thank you so much. So would the program as presented be self-sufficient? Well, does the principal cover new loan originations? Yes, it would. It would. Year 5 under, I had 3 different scenarios. If all of those loans were on an annual basis, had a 5-year term, the scenario B was a 10-year term. Scenario C was, what if you mixed it 50-50? And in year 5, under scenario A, the principal would cover new loan originations. And year 10, under scenarios B and C, then that would be self-sufficient as well as far as principal repayment. However, operational costs are not included. So any cost associated with the administration of this program were not included in that self-sufficiency information, in so much as the interest that would be collected would be set aside to run the administrative and the infrastructure of that program. In all these scenarios, we just couldn't get to the answer, like, meaning that the county government would need to supplement this program on an annual basis. And I'm happy to go over the details. They were pretty, somewhat extensive. The analysis that I conducted is, 5 or 6 pages long, and but I'm happy to go over it in more detail if you'd like, Chairman.
What I did notice is that it appears as you said, the administration cost really it runs at a deficit compared to the return. And I assume, and maybe incorrectly, that that's maybe economies of scale. So if the more loans we had, the lower the lower the administrative cost would be per loan, or is that an incorrect assumption? So,
Well, I can tell you that I based this off of information that I calculated from how the Aqua Fund program runs currently. And that program is popular right now, if you will. And so so much that it's pretty efficient. The efficiency has been driven by the number of loan applications that have come in and the number of payments that they process. So the number here would estimate, a pretty efficient program. So certainly these are estimations and,
Yes.
and early estimations at that. In addition to what is not included here is your infrastructure, meaning what kind of a software program are you going to purchase to institute this program? What kind of legal fees are going to be associated with it, and so forth. So I agree with you that these numbers may be not as conservative as they should be.
Okay, but so am I correct in assuming that the cost per loan, the servicing cost per loan would be fairly consistent, whether we had 10 loans or 100 loans, it would be about the same, so we'd still carry that deficit even going forward as theoretically the loan program grew.
Yes.
So okay, that's
correct.
when I understood that part. Assistant Administrator Herrick has her hand up, and if she'd like to weigh in, that'd be great.
Thank you. What I wanted to add is on the loan origination side, our unit costs could be higher than the Aqua Fund's costs because there is loan qualification, as I recall in this proposed ordinance, that the Aqua Fund does not have to conduct. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will open up to the committee if they have any questions. I believe everyone got a copy of this report, and I know there was a lot there. But is there any questions? And it did answer most of the questions I had regarding this program. Should it go forward? I see no hands up, which means this report was so thorough, all the questions were answered. Okay, Delegate Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just say that I'm very interested in the detailed report, which I did not have time to review carefully before this meeting, and I will be taking the time to do so. Thank you.
Okay, and if any questions arise, you can put those through Clerk Fletcher if you have any questions for Director Capola.
Thank you.
Okay, if there is nothing further, then we will move on. Is there nothing further? Delegate Green?
We are going to move on, right? Yeah, to matters that are legal. Is that correct?
I don't understand. What do you mean matters that are legal?
I understand that there was a legal opinion.
Well, there's still some question about that, but right now we're just studying. We're just looking at the information we have in hand. So, do you have any questions for Director Capola?
I do not. No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Delegate Harder, please.
Thank you, Delegate Chair Killian. So it says that you said it will never become self-sufficient. But it does the administration of it once it's up and running, right? We've got the software, we've got it in place, we know what we're doing. It won't be self-sufficient, but will the administrative costs be negligible? I mean, significant. Or will they, once it gets going, will that just be, somebody needing to spend an hour or so on it a week and not a full-time job? Thanks.
I'm not sure you can answer that, Director Capola, but if you'd like to comment.
Sure, I'd be happy to comment that from the scenario that I calculated, the interest that would be collected to support the administration of the program doesn't reach the level of the cost of the program in any scenario. And it also doesn't include the cost that I provided, doesn't include technology systems, financial accounting systems, human resource, general administration as well. So there was no way for me to be able to provide information that I thought that would be reliable for those categories in such a, short notice. But so, from the scenario that I provided, or from the document, and the analysis that I conducted and provided in a report, I did not find that interest collected would be sufficient.
Thank you for that. Delegate King.
Thank you, Chairman Killian. Would it be, would 1 year, a 1 year pilot on this thing and help in determining if it could be helpful in the long term, in a long range plan? Would that be helpful, gathering that kind of information?
Was that directed? I'm sorry.
I believe it was. I think the question is, will it provide sort of operational data? Is that what Delegate King was looking for?
Yes, that's correct. Go ahead.
I'm certain a pilot program would provide information. The challenge is the startup costs.
If I may, isn't the startup cost in this proposal as part of it? I don't know how we're funding that.
It's not. What's in there is simply the loan amount. There is no administrative cost, startup costs included,
Right.
theoretically. I mean, what's been proposed is 65,000 for 13 loans. So there is no other cost
Right.
associated with it. Assistant Administrator Harik, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question?
No, I was going to respond if Carol didn't. Thank you.
Okay. Delegate Green?
Thank you, Chair Killian. Yeah, I mean, I think I stated in the general meeting that this is a huge problem, but I don't think that this is a great solution. But I would be very interested in trying to explore good solutions for this very important problem. And I see that Mr. Platt is on the line as well. Did you have an intention to talk
Yes.
with him at all?
Yes, he's up
Okay.
next. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions for the Finance Director? Seeing none, I would like to thank you, Ms. Capola, for joining us today. The report was very detailed and very helpful for what we're looking at.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Platt, I think you are up next. I think you are still with us.
I am, sir. Thank you. I am on the road, so I do apologize if my service is less than ideal.
That's quite all right. I invited you here today because we just want to get perhaps a little bit of your insight with situations that are arising where we have lost power generator, what generator backup is required. One of the possibilities I'm exploring with this program is something that doesn't really require county funds to participate. I'm looking to see if there's a possibility of the county being able to partner with generator installers to create or facilitate ways in which homeowners can interact with these companies. I know some of these companies do offer financing, so I'm looking to see if you had any thoughts on a program like that and how it might work, perhaps through the branch of your government, because I think you will probably be the most familiar with how it would operate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So, generally, when we look at programs that we operate in emergency management, it's really about, when we open the shelters, for example, we want as few people to have to go there as possible. That's usually so the more resilient of a population we can make, the better for that. I think there are programs similar to that to increase resiliency, whatever that may mean, whether that's generator support, community education. Those do exist. They generally exist through organizations like the Red Cross, and I think something like this, I think the route in which we generally look at programs like this would be through the BCREPC, bringing it to them and seeing if it's something that towns potentially would want a partnership in, because that really is the coalition of the towns. And our staff within our division provides, we provide the clerk to that. We provide kind of the coordination and the administrative work for that. But I think that's the avenue where programs like this in the past, and anything in kind of the resilience makes sense to try to channel through and try to partner through. And certainly that's where kind of our division comes in and how we staff and we provide staff time to support those different programs. It's kind of the same with the regional shelter program. That's a program developed by that coalition, the REPC, and then we use our staff time to support it kind of through our division. So I think that's a channel and probably a conversation potentially to have with them and the chairs, and maybe even bring to a meeting to discuss, how something like that could work.
And that's one of the issues that came up, was the suggestion being that if we had more resiliency, then the need for shelters would decline and therefore create some sort of savings along with it. But in your opinion, is that a realistic goal that could be accomplished through a program that encourages this type of resiliency? I mean, is that something that's really a long-term goal than anything that could be done in the next 5 years?
I think the reality, and I would kind of echo what Ms. Goldstein was saying, a program that a lot of times in the shelters, what I've seen in the shelters myself, and we saw in this last time, we do have a lot of vulnerable residents. We've had a lot of folks who come in on oxygen simply to plug in because they need to. And I know that, as Ms. Goldstein was saying, that when they send their single point of contact out, the police or fire chief, to do that wellness check, the result of that is often them going into the shelters. I would say that generally speaking, the towns, and by extension, the REPC and us through our support for them, we'll always have a kind of a statutory requirement to open shelters if the need arises. There are certainly, sheltering is more than just power. I think we often open shelters here on the Cape because of power in the wintertime. If we think about something like a hurricane, or even past snowstorms, we didn't see this in the past blizzard, and it's honestly pretty lucky we didn't. A lot of times when we have an influx of people coming into the shelters, it's because of evacuations due to flooding. For example, Barnstable Village or parts of Chatham or Provincetown, where we've seen that flooding in the past, those folks need a place to go. They end up going into the shelter. So I think the regional shelter system and those shelters would still activate, but any system, any program that reduces the number of people who need to go to the shelter, particularly for something like being cold, or if they have a generator and they can plug in, their oxygen tank or the dialysis machine or whatever it may be, whatever durable medical equipment that they require for life sustaining. it reduces the burden on the shelter. So the shelter might still be open, but it may allow us to serve other people better, I guess would be the way to put it. It would keep spots open in the shelters for those who really critically need it most and can't get, especially those who might be displaced due to flooding or some other evacuation need, which is something we need to think about, especially with a hurricane, which, I think at that level, when you see a hurricane, yeah, the shelters are all going to be open, whether the power's out or not, because of the impacts that'll bring.
Assistant Administrator Harik, you have your hand up. Would you like to weigh in?
Thank you. I'd just like to follow on Andy's excellent comments. If the intent is to enhance resiliency, then I think that's a slightly larger question and a very interesting question, which suggests that a review of enhancing the county's resiliency and any appetite for investing in enhancement of resiliency is well advised prior to parachuting in on one particular solution, such as generators for a discrete number of people. Thank you.
No, I don't disagree with that approach, and we are considering that. That's why I'm looking at this as a way, not necessarily for the county to provide funding for something like this, but to provide many paths to resiliency, and generators being one of them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any of the other delegates have any questions for Mr. Platt? Delegate Harder?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy, Mr. Platt, what would be helpful, I think, for us, you are the expert in all this. And as Ms. Harit just said, this is one drop in an ocean of trying to help our constituents survive and be more self-sufficient. So if there's any ideas that I'm guessing you probably have some ideas of you and Vera, you and Miss Harik have some ideas that would be helpful in this topic. And at least I would be very welcome to hearing those ideas at some point. Thank you.
I would echo that, and as we just stated, this is will be part or can be part of a broader discussion, and obviously there are other elements to the self-sufficiency and resiliency, and I think there's all these members through the county government can help us with that, and we would certainly welcome any suggestions they would have to meet that end. Are there any more questions for Mr. Platt? If not, we're approaching 5 o'clock, so we'll be wrapping it up. Delegate Green. You're muted.
I tried. Okay. Just a quick question. Are there any resources now available, like Chair Killian had said about the website or anything, any resources about resiliency that we're not aware of, perhaps? I mean, is the county doing anything in that direction at this point in time?
Yeah, thank you, Delegate Green. Yeah, so we one of the things that we've been looking at, especially post-storm, and as we've been going through after action, at the risk of getting us off topic, I think expanding our resiliency programs and our community education programs around first of all, communications. We've had programs in the past trying to give out, things like radios and, AM, FM radios, because that's when the power goes out, that's going to be the way that people get information. We've been doing a lot of work with our communications director on updating the website. We actually are going to be doing another pass at that to increase that. I think that was a really helpful during the blizzard. I think a lot of folks got a lot of really good information during the storm. But as was alluded to, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about more, there's really need and the term I use is kind of disaster recovery and then mitigation. Those are kind of the two aspects. There is a mitigation plan. The commission has it. Some of the towns have it around programs that are put in place to try to mitigate the impacts of storms. And then I think where we can do a lot more work, and I know that there's an appetite to grow, not just at the county, but among the towns and the REPC, is really in that disaster recovery phase. Because and I think Bernie or Ms. Goldstein kind of referred to this, I think when we talk about something like a hurricane, which, hopefully we don't face, but we will eventually, the question becomes more about, we're going to have major impacts from that. The question becomes, how do we mitigate the infrastructure damage? How do we, through our planning, through how we build, how do we mitigate, how do we prevent loss of life through our response? But then really, how do we recover more quickly from the storm, whether that's power, through this example, whether that's making sure that we're working with our, with different community groups so that we can get into different vulnerable populations or, underserved populations to make sure that we're getting programming to them. I think there's a lot of great programs in the towns, but the question is, how do you get it to the people who need them that most, especially people who might be, less than keen on, reaching out, maybe don't want to talk to folks from the town government or from police or from fire. How do you reach those communities? And I think making sure they get those programs. So that's an area we can grow, I would say. There's some things, but I think we can do a lot better with it.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Platt? Seeing none, I'm going to thank our guests, Mr. Platt and Director Capola, for joining us and providing us with a vast amount of information to move forward with this analysis. And with that, I am going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for your time, and
Thanks very much.
everybody.
Very
Thank
Thank you
informative.
very
Thank you.
much. It was
This
great
was
meeting.
great. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
take care.